The Metzapowali, an ancient book of the Mexicas, prophesies the arrival of a light-skinned people who would steal the ancient knowledge of the indigenas. In this period, known as El Quinto Sol, the new arrivals would manipulate these ideas for their materialist self-interest rather than for the benefit of all people. 505 years later, we are entering El Sexto Sol. In this period, there is a rebirth of consciousness and an awakening of our efforts to reclaim our history and culture in order to control our destinies.
In 1848, Mestizo and indigenous people in the recently occupied Southwest experienced a second wave of European colonization. Although the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo protected rights to land and culture, Chicanos have always had to resist racist exploitation and affirm culture. From early resistant movements, Pachuco battles, labor struggles, and up to the fight for an equal education.
The 1960s was a period of social unrest throughout the world. People of all colors, creeds, and genders told the world "ya basta" to the outright discriminatory and exploitative practices against people of color. In the U.S. Southwest, and California in particular, farm workers unified for better wages and safe working conditions. Chicanos also joined hands to protest the Chicano involvement and high mortality rate in the Vietnam War. In the educational realm, Los Angeles witnessed one of the largest high school demonstrations, known as the 1968 blowouts, where Chicano students demanded a relevant education.
As a result of the unrest and political activism, universities were forced to open their doors as the first large groups of underrepresented people of color arrived. Part of the mission of the first Chicano students at the university was to, in their own words, take the university back to the barrio, brick by brick. The Plan de Santa Barbara, drafted in 1969, was the earliest blueprint manifesto for establishing Chicano studies on university campuses. El Plan stated, "The role of knowledge in producing powerful social change, indeed revolution, cannot be underestimated."
After 25 years of non-commitment by the university, Chicanos had exhausted all means of negotiating a Chicano Studies department. After protests, faculty committees, and proposals, the Raza community was forced to undertake a hunger strike. On May 25, 1993, in honor of Cesar Chavez and his commitment to non-violent struggle, 5 UCLA students, 1 high school student, 2 community members, and 1 professor began a water-only fast for a Chicano Studies department. After 14 turbulent days of fasting, thousands of phone calls, letters, and petitions, the UCLA administration was pressured by the community to establish the Cesar y Chavez Center.
Are you willing to die for this?
Absolutely.
Help us understand why.
Because it's been too long, because we can't go on the way we've been going, for one person makes decisions about what kind of education we will get. The education students here at UCLA get is a very important factor as to whether we get racial harmony or racial confrontation. It's time to change.
For the latest on this continuing story, Tricia?
Jean and Marianne, the students here at UCLA have literally taken over this quad area behind me, which is in front of the Murphy Hall Administration Hall here. And as we speak, there are 3 student representatives and 3 faculty representatives who are currently in a meeting with Chancellor Charles Young to discuss the possibility of establishing a Chicano Studies department here at UCLA. Now, they say they have been forced to take these drastic moves because all of their other efforts have fallen upon deaf ears.
Back on campus, the hunger strikers were not in a festive mood. They've made a list of demands for the university. The fasters want the school to create an independent Chicano Studies program. They also want the university to drop charges against students arrested in a protest last month. And they want funding for more courses on ethnic and gender studies.
These UCLA students say they're prepared to fast till death, explaining pain for a few could mean life for many.
Because in the end, our sacrifices are for the children. Our sacrifices are for those seeds that have yet to grow. Our sacrifices are so that our people can live in harmony, so that we can live in harmony with everything else that lives. That's why they should care.
¿Ha habido en algún momento ese temor a la muerte?
Pues Temor no, porque nosotros estamos preparados como indígenas espiritualmente a ir a la larga vida, pero sí queremos que valga la pena nuestro sacrificio aquí, porque nuestros sacrificios es para los niños, para las semillas que todavía faltan brotar. Y pues hay que hacer entender a este rector, y pido que si hay madres que nos están escuchando ahorita, que nos ayuden a ablandar el corazón de este rector, o si no se le ablanda, a quitarlo de su posición, porque esta institución tiene que ser para la juventud, tiene que ser para educación, no solamente para hacer dinero.
What's worth more, a false pride or the ultimate human sacrifice of these young people?
We told the chancellor what we expect is we want him to clear his calendar. Nothing could be more important than to sit down and resolve this issue now. We want him to spend the time, whatever it takes, to sit down at the table and begin to talk and dialogue. And
to which he said? What was his reaction?
His reaction is that he's a busy man.
By contrast, the chancellor contends that he cannot allow himself to be intimidated.
If you give on any point, any issue, anywhere, if a group of people, in effect, in a different way, hold a gun to your head, then.
But they're not holding it to your head. They're holding it to their own heads.
I'd rather they held it to my head than their own.
Chancellor Young has no more meetings scheduled with the students for later today. In fact, we're told that he's out of town and won't be back for a couple of days.
We think that all of these students here are being held as political tools, as political puppets in this whole battle that's going on right now.
The university got us into jail on May 11th. It can get us out of this situation, and we're hoping that it'll come to reason and begin the process of not stopping our future by basically treating us like criminals like they did on May 11th.
Who is one of the members of the Committee of UCLA Parents for Chicano Studies. Describe for us the anguish that parents are feeling as their children go through this.
Well, you know, every parent wants to have a healthy young child forever. But we bring our children into the world and teach them values and teach them to stand up and to be accountable for other people in this world. And we bring our kids up and to teach them from right from wrong. And we teach them not to be afraid to face injustice. And, you know, we don't always think that it's going to wind up where they're going to, when we send them to UCLA, that they're going to come here and face the same injustice that we talk about philosophically. And the fact is that we sent our children here, and they faced and encountered bigotry, injustice, racism, and they, on their own volition, decided that they were going to do something about it. I don't think any of us are and want to do that. I don't think anyone here really believes that our children have to die. That's why we're here 24 hours a day. That's why we're camped out here. That's why we're doing everything that we can to try to resolve this issue. But we're doing it in a manner that will keep intact the belief system and integrity that our children have demonstrated here. Yeah, it hurts. It hurts every day. It hurts every day to watch someone that you love and those that you've come to love slowly deteriorate. And that makes us work even harder as parents, because we recognize that we must stand next to them every step of the way when they dare to stand up for themselves and other people.
A group of Chicana grandmothers from Ramona Gardens Housing Project and Dolores Mission Church went upstairs to the Chancellor's office.
You say there are no funds for a Chicano department, yet there are funds for a French studies department with classes on French literature, language, history, and philosophy. Does the size of LA's French population justify this expense? The bottom line is racism and power. Bueno. The reason there's money for a French department studies and not a Mexican is about Euro-American power. That's the bottom line. They want to maintain the status quo.
This struggle is about respect and fairness. This is about people understanding that the European thought that's being taught in our universities needs to be enhanced with our indigenous thought.
Meanwhile, talks with the university about a solution are in the initial stages.
Not anyone has done what they are trying to do. They are giving a
a tremendous blow against the racism in our educational system.
Why is it so important that we have a Chicano-Chicana studies program at any university or school?
I think so we can exist. We have to look at the university where we're protesting here at UCLA. This is the flagship of Southern California academically. All decisions made in academia are political. They're not academic. They don't go to the core of what is good to be studied or what should be studied, but what people want to be studied. And those are people who control those universities. And in this case, we have the majority of white males, and they determine what should be studied in these universities. And one white male, Chuck Young, Chancellor Chuck Young, 3 years ago said that there would be a Chicano Studies department over his dead body. Having an interdisciplinary department is a form of colonialism. You have, what you have is a situation where you don't control what is taught, you don't control who teaches it, you don't control the review process, you don't control curriculum. And with a Chicano Studies department, you would have that control. And pressure on people for him to come on down and to start to talk about it made him come down here. And I think that's tragic. If these were the children of white alumni, he would have been really upset. But he says, no, these children, and this is what he called them, he says, are playing games. You know, they're playing games. Well, how about the fraternities over there? He condones them. He's one of the big supporters of fraternities. Are they playing games? This institution spends millions of dollars on the football team and other athletics. Are they playing games? No, these people are not playing games. These other people are playing games. These people have their life on the line to better this community, and I think that this should be applauded.
Politicians like State Senator Art Torres and City Councilman Mike Hernandez and actors like Edward James Olmos came today to show solidarity with the protesters.
I am here in peace. Yes, I'm a senator of California, but more importantly than that, I'm a Chicano.
Now, this hunger strike comes after a month of on-campus demonstrations.
People are coming down here.
After a month of demonstrations by students on campus, in which students are asking the administration here.
Mexico are going to come down here and represent our people.
They have been asking the administration.
I was a student at this university 20-some years ago. At that time, they were talking about a Chicano Studies department. 20 years ago, one generation ago, that must change now. Now.
We see the ramifications of racism and disregard for life.
I know it's to death, and I know it's for future generations to come.
I really don't want them to die, and I don't want to either. But I feel that if we have to, then I will do it.
And now scenes from the next episode.
Who were then in their own struggle, a very tough struggle that got recycled several times, just like the struggle for Chicano studies has been recycled many times at different campuses and here also. When those truck drivers came with their trucks, with their vehicles, with their rias, and took to the streets of the campus, to Sunset, to Hillgard, and many people didn't know what quite was going on. These enormous rigs, driven in many cases by immigrant Latinos, showing their solidarity for what was taking place here. Dialogue is important. But dialogue is not only a two-way street, it's a multiple street. And when somebody says there is no room for dialogue, then there's a problem. We have to build education in dialogue and in partnership. But a partnership and a dialogue that, one, provides for inclusive participation. When participation is sort of genuflected, but then in the same breath, saying X, Y, and Z, groups, sectors, individuals can participate, we know what kind of dialogue that is. When somebody says, I make the decisions, and you follow them or else, we know what kind of dialogue that is. The people who made this program possible, whose photographs you will see, many who are here indeed came to contradecir, but also to afirmar. We have tomorrow and the day after, and struggling against hegemony is indeed hard work, especially if you really do it. But hegemony can be taken on, and people united never will be defeated. Thank you.
I want to welcome Minnie Ferguson as our next speaker. And Minnie was a student who's been very active in the struggle for the creation of the Chicano Studies Department, and was very much involved through the hunger strike.
I'd like to apologize because I was late, and I don't know if I'm going to duplicate myself a little in what I'm going to say. I hope I don't. First of all, I want to say that what Professor Gomez-Quillones said is very true. I mean, you really have to think about what he said in terms of your organizing efforts. Organizing is a very scientific process. It doesn't happen when it happens in a very haphazard way, you end up getting results that are just very frustrating for everyone. I think one of the things that students really need to keep in mind is that you need to be very, very scientific about what you do. There are strategies and approaches you use. As a Mexican student on this campus, when we first approached the issue, of course, there was years and years of work. The very first thing we really had to do was study the history, know it better than anyone else who was fighting against us. We had to know who was who influenced who sat on what committee, what those people did, what meetings they attended. We had to be there. We had to put them on check. We had to be creative about the approaches. We had to think what was going to influence what audience. We had people from all different spectrums who wanted to participate. Some people didn't know how to. We had to figure out where people fitted. Everyone has a place. And one of the very, very important things that I think perhaps at this time is lacking from what I know is that there isn't a community support. That has to be built. As one of the females who was involved in the whole effort, it was very important for us as women, and a lot of us fought for Chicana and Chicano studies. And we even fought for Chicana to be said before Chicano because of the efforts that women do. And as women, we really had to think of ways that we were going to be creative to reach out to our community, to get the mothers involved, to get all the different groups involved. One of the very important things was to find those community people that had influence in our community, that had bases. Professor Gomez-Quinones was very instrumental in that. Okay, we have to be very thankful to a lot of the people that basically just allowed us into their meetings because of Professor Gomez-Quinones, because of other people that were helping us out. You know, one of the things that's going to happen is that the administration here and others are going to make you very confused. They're going to now be your friends. They're going to make you think that they were involved and that they actually let it happen. I'm here to tell you that was not true. My husband was a hunger striker. He was prepared to die. And I was prepared to let him die. We were very committed. And I think that when you're fighting, you have to be very, very clear on what your goals are. And you have to be ready to fight, have a really clear head about what your goals are. What are you fighting for? Be very specific. And know what you're willing to give up, because you have to be willing to give up something. People who are fighting against you are full-time on this. They have lots of resources. And all you have, well, you have a lot. You have your time, your commitment, your family, your community. It's your job to organize it all, to put it all together in such a fashion that it's going to work. And from sort of keeping in contact with people who still know what's going on here, hear a lot of different things about certain people saying that they've been involved, that they've helped out, that this and that. And let me tell you, I was involved all the way from my undergraduate career until right when I wrote my thesis in graduate school. I was one of the few graduate students who was involved, fighting out there. I was prepared to not finish my thesis if that's what it took. That's where I was in the hunger strike. When I was about to be arrested, I was on a chancellorial scholarship. Could have lost it, but you know what? That's what it takes sometimes. And I know it sounds tough, but everyone's got to be willing to sacrifice. Maybe it's not a big scholarship. Maybe it's not your thesis. Maybe it's your grades here and there. But you know what? We're Mexican. We weren't born with the luxury of fooling around, getting drunk like the Prats do, and messing up our grades, having some tutor write the papers for us. No, we got to do it all. We really got to be able to do it all and manage it. And many of us were successful. We graduated. We did well for ourselves in that way. But you know what? We were willing to put it on the line. And that's what made us serious enough to be taken serious. And when we went into those committees, we knew more than the university administrators. We knew more about their committees, more about their numbers, more about this and that. Why? Because we studied. We knew about the curriculums from across the United States. We knew about, who was where when someone from the administration was here, there. We thought that it mattered that their friends knew what was going on. We were there. We were there to remind them. We were their embarrassment, really. And I know that some of you feel that that is not a good approach, that that's embarrassing. That's not who we are as Mexican people. No, you know who we aren't? We're not the people that are going to be on our knees forever. That's who we are. And when you have to think about, well, this isn't going to make us look good. We don't look good already. Right? So really, it isn't going to matter. They're just going to throw that at your face. Marcos, my husband, who will be speaking later, and I were sometimes told we were too aggressive because sometimes we heckled. He in particular, as a man, I guess stood out a little more, was perhaps a little more threatening than I was. But you know what? That didn't matter. Those things can't matter. You have to be willing to do all sorts of things. All sorts. I guess what I think is the most important thing are a few things, and I kind of wrote a few things. I just wanted to make sure I didn't forget it because it's been a long day for me. Again, I want to just re-emphasize that you need to be clear on what you're fighting for. You need to have it written down. You need to know it inside out. You have to know what you're willing to compromise, what you're not willing to compromise for. You have to have your committees, your study groups that you know what you're doing, you know what you're fighting for, you know who you're up against, you know where they're at, what their meetings are at. You know everything about them and about what they do. Also, in terms of some of the important things to consider when you're fighting is that you really, really have to have a solid base of women. The women who are here, you have to organize yourself. You have to have some kind of, call it a woman's circle, call it in Mecha, women's unit, call it whatever you want. The women have to be really together. That's what was so important to our struggle. The women were together. The women fought for Chicana studies to be a priority. We, of course, were in our style of organizing. I think it's fair to say that I can sit in a meeting with a few women and we get things done like in half the time or less than in a meeting with men and women. And we were able to do so much more. We were able to think about all the details that sometimes men don't. The hunger strike, I know to you it might seem petty, but food had to be organized for the organizers. Clothes had to be washed. All sorts of things. I don't think those are the kind of things that sometimes cross a man's mind. All those things are important. That's what I mean by you're willing to do everything. And the most important thing is that community base. You need to have it. You need to have your community behind you. You need to be well connected. You need to have your list of people who you're going to contact. You need to have your lawyers, your mothers groups, your unions. All that has to be organized. And if you don't have it, you have to start right there, along with your study groups to know what you're doing and what you're fighting for. And the other thing that's really important is don't get confused. Know who is who. Ask questions. Some of the people that are telling you right now they're your friends, they're not. I'm here to tell you they're not. And you need to ask about people. You need to find out who they are. Some of the people that have the positions right now, most of them don't deserve them. And they were there even encouraging students to fight against us who were organizing. So you need to get real clear on the history and as specific as names. And I'd just like to end by saying that don't give up. Be clear on your issues. Be clear on what you're willing to compromise. You have to sacrifice. Those before you gave up something. Some gave up a lot. Some gave up a little. But everyone who organized, be it a mother, be it a truck driver, be it a student like myself, we all gave up. And you need to do the same. Don't be so hung up on all these other things. You know what? Those things can get done way late at night. So you stay up later and you do your work. That's what it takes. And I'd just like to thank everyone who participated in this. I know it's a lot of work. And that whenever you need us back, don't hesitate. That's our job. Anyone who is willing to sacrifice for the community, certainly willing to come here and talk to you. Thank you.
We're going to have the danzantes come in now, and we just would like people, just, if it's possible, to move back a little bit.
Aníbal Diego.
Toshipa. Na. Hijo, sale. Wasama. Na Toshipa wa. Na shila. Shila. Ke magolitsi malina sin klibu. Ke pawela si chopatale. Oshila. Let's take out demo. Mashila shito. Paco. Shila. De Shilon, il will camina, Shile Pauna. Ona. Now stay hey, say yo stay papa que wa yo pinisha. ¿Qué diablos está diciendo esto? Sí, hablo mi lengua. Y ellos hablan mi lengua. Soy indio, sí. Soy moreno, sí. Soy mexicano, sí. Y tengo mucho orgullo de serlo. ¿Ya? Y ellos igual. But I know there's some people that only speak English. Yeah, even 2 years ago they were over there in Tijuana. Now they speak English only. Yeah. I am Indian, yes. I am brown, yes. I am Mexican, yes. And I'm so proud to be like that. Because I am descendant of the original people of this land. I am Ture. Yeah. I am not descendant from the invader. Yeah. Whatever they want to call now, there by themselves. For me, they're still being the invaders. Yeah. I am Indian. And I know what they did long time ago. And I know what they will do to you. They will promise to you many things, and they will break those promises. Yeah, I know them from a long time ago. Through my people, they signed many treaties, and they broke many treaties. Yeah, so they will sign to you many treaties, and they will break many treaties with you. Yeah. We know this, and that's why quiero enseñarles eso. Nunca le crean. Nunca le crean al que representa a aquel que es el invasor. Don't trust them. Don't trust them. Because they will hit you right here. They will speak to you like in a peaceful way right here in front. Yeah? But behind, they will preparing something to kill you, something to destroy you. Yeah? Y cuando hablo de destrucción, no solamente es matarlos. Cuando hablo de destrucción es quitarles su cultura, su tradición, su historia, su manera de ser y de pensar, su manera de relacionarse con la madre naturaleza. Eso también es matarlos. Matarlos aquí, matarlos aquí, matarlos aquí. Y cuando ya están bien muertos de esa manera, entonces son una bola de idiotas que pueden caminar a través de esta sociedad que ellos han fabricado para ustedes, pero no para nuestra gente. Si ustedes siguen conservando dentro de esto y dentro de esto, ¿quiénes son? Se sienten orgullosos de ser quienes son, se unen orgullosos de ser quienes son, luchan juntos porque son orgullosos de ser quienes son. Jamás ningún hijo de la fregada los va a vencer. Gracias. ustedes, for many of you, Jerónimo. En español, Jerónimo. En inglés, Jerónimo. Ah. Ellos dicen, no, era un indio salvaje. They tell you, he was a savage Indian. A savage. It's a lie. Jerónimo, un luchador por la libertad de nuestra tierra. Y de los dos lados. Peleó contra el invasor anglosajón. Y peleó también contra los descendientes de los españoles que después usurparon el gobierno de independencia en México. ¿Ya? Entiéndanlo bien. Y nos siguen fregando. Porque si no, díganme quiénes son los presidentes en México. Ahí les va. ¿Ya? Luis Echeverría Álvarez. ¿Ya? Después, José López Portillo. ¿Ya? Después, hombre, Redié, Miguel de la Madrid. Redié, hombre. ¿Ya? Pues seguimos con el mejor ladrón de todos, ¿verdad? Que hasta le ganó a Hernán Cortés. Ya, Carlos Salinas de Gortari. ¿Ya? Y pues ahora tenemos a quién. Pues a quién tenemos. Pues a Ernesto Cedillo Ponce de León. ¿Ya? Spaniards, descenden of the invaders. Guáchenle quién tienen a la cabeza del Chincano Department aquí. ¿Ya? Guáchenle. ¿Ya? Guáchenle. Raza, la manga aquí. ¿Ya? No es cierto. El que está a la cabeza de todo eso es alguien que antes de que se iniciara la huelga de hambre ya quería destruir todo Chincano Department y todo. ¿Ya? Así es de que agarren la onda. Lo mismo que nos sucede en México, que los españoles siguen estando en el gobierno, por lo mismo les va a suceder aquí. Si ustedes no se ponen buzos caperuzos y defienden lo que es suyo, les van a poner ahí alguien que represente al invasor, que no va a tener nada que ver con ustedes y va a tratar de destruir todo lo que ustedes han logrado. Así claro y de sencillo. Y entonces por eso nosotros decimos, pues viva Jerónimo, porque él es uno de nuestros héroes. ¿Ya? A mí me trataron de enseñar, bueno, no a mí, a mis chavalos les tratan de enseñar. Nexé Cuauhtémoc, o sea, es mi hijo, ya. Nexé Cuauhtémoc, ¿quién es tu padre? George Washington. Pero yo ya le enseñé a mi hijo, ya cuando te digan, hey, ¿quién es tu padre? Levántate y dice, soy huerfanito. ¿Ya? Soy huerfanito, ¿ya? Allá en India, ¿tú sabes por qué soy huerfanito? Allá en India, because I still having a father. But you stole my land. But you stole my mother. You stole my land. That's why. ¿Ya? Allá en huerfanito. Por algún día volveré a abrazar a mi madre. Algún día volveré a abrazar a mi madre tierra. Algún día volveré a tenerle cariño, amor y devoción. Algún día te voy a comer de mi reina. Acuérdense de una cosa. Cometimos un error. Nuestros antepasados cometieron un error hace mucho tiempo. ¿Ya? Pregunta de historia para ustedes. ¿Quién es el primero, el real, el verdadero, el único mojado que llegó a estas tierras? ¿Ah? ¿Quién es? ¿Quién es? Ya lo saben, no se hagan tarugos. Se llama Christopher Colón. Y después de Christopher Columbus llegaron los otros verdaderos mojados. ¿En dónde? En el Mayflower. La neta, les estoy hablando la verdad. Les estoy diciendo la verdad. Y nuestros antepasados cometieron un error. Sí, cometimos un error. Desafortunadamente, en 1492, 12 de octubre de 1492, nuestros antepasados no le pidieron la Green Card a Christopher Columbus.
¿No más? ¿Y los demás? Les voy a preguntar otra vez, ¿cuántos hablan español aquí o les da vergüenza decir que hablan español? ¿No? Oh, está mejor, está mejor. Voy a hablar en español y en inglés para que no se agüiten los que no hablan español. I'm going to talk in Spanish and English because if I start throwing down in Nahuatl, not too many of my brothers and sisters will understand it, huh? And I'll probably jumble it all up myself too. I think the most important thing, and those people that are out there that know me are going to laugh at what I'm going to say because it doesn't sound like me. But the most important thing that we should take away from this, now, what we should remember is the need for unity. And the need for unity in a political struggle, in a struggle like the one that we took on, is so important. It's what lost what we should have had and what we should have been able to leave for all of you that are here today. The reason why you don't have those professors that are full-time in that department is because that unity broke down. The reason why you're losing that counselor today is because that unity broke down. And when that unity broke down, it became easy for the administration to step in and kick out the dollars, porque de eso tienen mucho, y de eso siempre nos dan. And we lost one here and one there. Oh, I'll give you a scholarship for this. Oh, okay. And I'll pay your vacation for this. Oh, okay. Y ese nos iban. And what we need to remember is a few things about who our people are. And not just Mexican people, but also Mexican people. Only 9% of all Mexican people in the United States have a college education. 60% of our people are living in poverty and near poverty. How many of your families don't come from that background? 30% of our people have less than a 9th grade education, and here we all are. And we got to remember who this power structure is that we fought against and that you're fighting against now, and that we continue those battles in other areas. Chancellor Young is part and a product of a system that started up this university on the west side of LA that was money laundering, death providing, financial investment, speculation, corporation that started back in the turn of the century when the Gabas first came to our land. 50 years later, they were already putting their intellectual paradise out. By 1900, they were already planning it all out. And Chancellor Young represents that old money. And the people who back him up, the Chandler Corporation, the owners of Times, LA Times, and the Baltimore Sun and other newspapers, they back him up. And that's the money that we're fighting against, and that's the money that we have to follow the trail of. Because it's not just that they don't like Chicana and Chicano studies, and it's not just that they don't like Mexicans at their university, but it's that the reality of our people across the nation is so bad. Even still today, we can talk about the civil rights, but what has the civil rights gotten us? Just a few promises that are broken in a few years. And so what if 209 passed? It was a gimmick anyways. We have to fight for a little bit more than 209 and see a little bit farther than 209 and 187 and whatever code name they want to give it. Just like you have to see today beyond that one counselor that you're losing and see that what the original demands were was for a full department, and the reason why we accepted calling it a CCC, like Jorge is going to remind us, a center, is because there was supposed to be full-time faculty. And if we had a weak link at the end, that was the weak link. Because the only faculty that had any of these was Juan Gómez Quiñones and Jorge Mancias. And everybody else who promised, and Leo Estrada too. And everybody else, and Steve Loza. And everybody else backed out. And everybody else chickened out. And they forget that the reason why they have their jobs is because people like you are going to put their education on the line, and people like you are going to put their lives on the line in order to do it. And I know you will, because otherwise this room wouldn't be packed. You're questioning something, you're interested in something, and yet they're still doing this to us across the nation. And it's important for you to see the struggles that go on this campus is not just a student struggle, but it's something that impacts the community and something that's a part of the community, and to see yourselves as a part of the community. Because unless we have that kind of consciousness as students, then all we're doing is playing high school elections. And all we're doing is declaring war before we even build any kind of thing to offer our people. And we can't do that. Because a lot of people sacrifice for you to be here. A lot of people, not just your family, sacrifice for you to be able to be in this. When Juan Gómez Quiñones was coming here, there was probably 70 Mexican students in the entire campus. And now there's more. So what? Again, only 9% of all our people ever get a college education. And so then that so what has to be made meaningful. And that's your job, and that's your obligation, and that's what people left to you, is to make that so what meaningful, and to make that education meaningful, and to make the connections. Porque el dinero que meten aquí para controlar las mentes de nosotros, salen. Y cuando nosotros nos tienen todos controlados aquí, pues también podemos controlar a los demás. Sí, se llama colonización. Y todavía existe, aunque diferente. Y cuando nosotros empezamos a creer sus mentiras, y cuando empezamos a creer, sí, yo me puedo graduar de aquí, y luego voy a agarrar mi carro, y luego voy a agarrar mi casa, y luego ya voy a ser feliz, porque papi, pues es todo lo que quería papi, ¿verdad? Por eso se hizo alcohólico, por eso estaba trabajando tanto, por eso mi mamá aguantaba esos golpes, por eso trabajaban tanto. Entonces muchas veces la gente dice, pues no puedo desperdiciar que esté aquí, tengo que estudiar, tengo que hacer esto, no me puedo meter en esas bronquillas porque me voy a perder ahí y luego a lo que viene no importa. Chale con eso. En 1968 mataron a miles de estudiantes en México. Ese movimiento es parte de nosotros. Cada estudiante que matan alrededor del mundo, nos debemos de ver como parte de eso, para que impacte. Ustedes aquí tienen la tecnología, como lo demostraron hoy, para hacer bastantes cosas. Y tenemos que agarrar eso, lo poco que nos dan, y usarlo contra ellos. Entonces la unidad, con propósito, con entrega a la comunidad, con autodisciplina, que es lo que más que nada nos falta. Porque el sábado llega y... ¿Ya qué? ¿Movement? What? Oh yeah, Chicano Power. Y eso no vale. porque así nos van quitando todo. Necesitamos entrega, entregarnos a la comunidad, entregarnos a la causa. Pase lo que pase, y el poder sacrificar lo poco que tenemos para que alguien más tenga más. Como dicen en el sur, ¿no? Para todos todo y para nosotros nada. Y con esa mentalidad, ustedes serían poderosos aquí, porque de ahí los traen. A ti ya te dieron poquito, ¿por qué lo vas a arriesgar? Y tenemos que cambiar eso, aunque perdamos todo, porque así tiene que ser aquí también y en todo el mundo. Para todos todo, para nosotros nada. Muchas gracias.
UCLA, la huelga de hambre de estudiantes y de maestros. You know, as Irene asked me if I wanted to say a few words, I asked myself, well, what would I want to tell the students and everybody that's here tonight that would make what happened 5 years ago meaningful back then as well as meaningful now, so that we can think about what we're going to do that's going to be very meaningful further down the road. And the first thing that came to mind is that we have to ask ourselves, why are we commemorating la huelga de hambre de los estudiantes y maestros that took place 5 years ago? And I think that the answer is very obvious. We're commemorating it because it was very, very, very important for many, many people's lives back then, now, and in the future. Then the second question is, why was it so important? Other than the fact that it achieved what it set out to do in large degree. Because after all, we do have el Centro César Chávez. But more important que el Centro César Chávez, without diminishing how important that is to understand que la huelga de hambre de estudiantes y maestros and the support of the entire community, not just in Southern California, but across the United States and across Latin America, because everybody saw it on TV. Everybody that had a TV saw what happened in UCLA 5 years ago. And everybody was inspired, and all that energy came our way, and it didn't stop at UCLA. Because after the summer of 5 years ago, a group of us got together because we were able to foresee what was coming down upon our people as early as 1993, with this growing racist movement called SOS, which would eventually graduate into Proposition 187. But what happened at UCLA 5 years ago set in motion forces that saved our most precious treasure as a people, our dignity. Many of us could not vote 5 years ago, and many of us were told by many, many people not to do anything about 187 other than do phone banking and get out the vote and some of the traditional stuff. But our people learned with what happened 5 years ago at UCLA during the huelga. And we set a movement in motion which hasn't stopped yet. It started at UCLA, it continued 4 years ago today, February the 26th. Remember Juan Gomez Quiñones? In East LA, corner of Cesar Chavez Boulevard and Indiana. 7,000 of our people marched down Cesar Chavez and went before City Hall to demand that our dignity be respected. That we be afforded full rights as a people. That we no longer be treated as illegals. And we also told everyone that we would not accept the sinister plan that the racist Republicans and all the right-wingers in this state and in this nation had designed for us, which was that we would be the modern-day slaves for the next 25 years unless we stop that plan. And we started with 7,000. There were 35 to 50,000. Many of you participated on May 28th, right before the primaries 5 years ago. And then many people told us no more marches. And we went out on October 16th, 1994, and we had hundreds of thousands of our people on the streets saying no to 187, no to racism, yes to our dignity, and yes to our freedom. And it all started 5 years ago today at UCLA during la huelga de estudiantes, maestros y comunidad. And what happened on October 16th did not stop there. Because finally, on October 16th, 1994, the youth, you who happen to be a majority of you high school students or or junior high school students, and some even grammar school students, right? After you felt what it was like to participate in a mass movement, after you stopped fantasizing about what it is to belong to a mass movement, after you stopped seeing Requiem 29, the movie, and after you stopped reading books and fantasizing about what it is to be part of a mass movement, and you felt it because you became part of it, what happened? Spontaneously, our people up and down the state exploded in strike after strike in grammar schools, in junior high schools, in high schools, and pretty soon it almost seemed like all anarchy was going to break out in the entire state. And the state was afraid, and Pete Wilson was afraid, and the Republican Party was afraid, and the right-wingers were afraid because they didn't know what to expect after November 9th once Proposition 187 was voted in. It all started 5 years ago here at UCLA. UCLA unleashed forces which are not back in the genie bottle yet. And I think that's why we're commemorating that fateful day when students, courageous students and professors and community people said, let's take that one fateful step. Let's go for the hunger strike. We don't want any more promises. Juan Gomez Quiñones and many others have worked for 30 years. Many of you weren't even born yet when they were already here at UCLA and at other universities, you know, organizing, structuring the type of ideas and plans and political foundations so that we could, so that we could have the day when all of us that wanted to get a university education, a college education, all of us that wanted to expand our mind would have the opportunity to do so. And that's why we celebrate that. And we didn't stop on October 16th. We didn't stop on November the 9th, the day of elections, right? We kept on going. And last year, I don't want to make too much of a long story. For the first time, I mean, not last year, 1996, we went against all odds and against all the advices of all the experts and all the people that have experience about doing these things. We went as Coordinadora 96 for the first time ever in the history of the Latino community in the United States to Washington, D.C. And we were as close to the White House as anybody's ever gotten. Not Simón Bolívar, not Benito Juárez, not Emiliano Zapata, not Francisco Villa, as heroic as they all are, and as deserving of our respect as they all are, nobody has ever been as close to the White House as we were on that October 12, 1996. And so that's why UCLA and the huelga of maestros and estudiantes, I believe, is very important. And I also believe that it's very, very important to price an education, regardless of whether or not the mind managers are using the educational system to control us and colonize us. It is important to get an education. That's why I went and got an education. And I went and I got an education because people went and fought before I did. And that's why I'm proud and I'm grateful and thankful that other people put their own personal faith on the line so that we can go to school. So that Patsy, who's over there, who went to school with me at Garfield High School in East LA, could also go to school, so that I could go to school, so that all of you could go to school, and your brothers and sisters can go to school. The struggle is not over. 1988 is an election year. There are many more struggles to fight. I hope that we can all come together. You're all very talented, and the idea is that only when we recognize our commonality of interest and we knock down the borders, not just the U.S.-Mexico border, but the borders that separate ourselves, people that grew up in the same neighborhoods, that went to the same schools, that are coming to the same university, recognize that those borders have to come down in every conceivable respect, and we must come together and organize ourselves so that we can really strive for the one thing that matters, and that is power in this county, power in this state, power in this country, because we deserve it. They owe it to us. It's been a long time in waiting. We will get it, but it will only come through the unity of all of us. Thank you.
Will be Milo Alvarez, who was a MECHA member throughout his undergraduate career and was active in the creation of the Cesar Chavez Center.
First of all, I want to say it's an honor and a privilege to be speaking here on this panel amongst the speakers who have spoke, because all these individuals have sacrificed a great deal of themselves to make Chicano studies even happen on this campus. If it wasn't for people that have already spoken and the people like them, there wouldn't even be a Chicano studies that would exist. And there's a couple of things I want to talk about too, just in terms of the organization of this event. Everybody should look around the room and see how many people are in this room, and see how many people are in this room in spite of the fact that the students who organized this event, had to post flyer after flyer because people kept tearing them down. And the number of people are in this room in spite of the fact that the faculty, the Chavez Center faculty, have collectively denounced this event in their classes publicly without even really knowing what it's about and what the students were asking for and what they were after. And quite frankly, since the day that the counselor position was eliminated, this is the largest by far turnout of any event, of any meeting that has happened about Chicano and Chicano studies. So let's make that very clear right now. A lot of people said that this was a one-sided event and that it lacked credibility. Let me tell you something. Everybody who has spoken on this panel were the people that were here, okay? Were the people that were here from day one. Day one 30 years ago, day one 5 years ago, day one 8 years ago, okay? So if anything's lacking credibility on this campus, it's not this meeting, that's for sure. There's a lot of ironies, and some of the things I want to do, what I would like to do is try to relay some of the things that have been said already to what's going on now, because there's a lot of, it's very ironic. That word irony is just really, really important, because what you have are people who are opposed to this and who are opposed to things like this are people who, one, were against the creation of a Chicano Studies Department, like Raymond Paredes, the now director of the Chavez Center, in the first place, and people who, excuse me, who were hired after the Chavez Center was created. And what's ironic about that is these people wouldn't have been hired in the Chavez Center if it wasn't for the struggle that took place already, beforehand. I mean, it's kind of funny how suddenly we kind of forget certain things, and we kind of forget, who we really should be maybe thanking for our jobs. I also want to thank Raymond Paredes for his role in organizing this event, because it was his quote-unquote leadership of doing away with the counseling position that brought the attention back to Chicano and Chicano studies and the governance of Chicano and Chicano studies and what it's about. So thank you, Raymond. I'm sorry you couldn't be here this evening, but I would just like to thank you. If anyone speaks and thank you for me, I'd like to personally extend that to them. Okay? Just a second. Give me a second. Okay, one of the things I also want to point out was that the irony of the counselor position itself. What was so ironic about that position was the counseling position was the very first concession. I remember when it happened too. Minnie was in the meeting and said, you know what, we should have, instead of a half-time counselor, a full-time counselor. And Ray Orbach, who was a provost at the time, we didn't have to go to a chancellor to get this counselor. He said, okay, sure, well, we'll do that. It was kind of just a little thing they kind of threw out to us as a concession, as a way to stabilize the program. So for him, that was the very first thing we got way back in 1990. So for him to have eliminated that position, and the reason why, the word stability is important, the reason why that position was created was to provide stability, because Chicano Studies was operating on a $1,500 a year budget and was only had 11 majors in the program. So the word stability is important because the counselor position was to provide stability for the program. And what is the first thing that is eliminated? Think about this. The first thing that is eliminated is the counseling position. When you eliminate one of the cornerstones of stabilizing a program, what are you trying to do to it? You're trying to destabilize that program. And that's exactly what that move was about. And don't think of it any different, because that is exactly where it was coming from. The fact that you have somebody who is not in support of the department running a program right now and making decisions like this a la brava without any input shows exactly what the intent on the part of that person is. I think the last thing that I want to say, and I'll kind of wrap it up, I don't want to be too long, but what I really want to emphasize is that there's kind of an open, we need to start establishing as an open dialogue and opening up avenues of communication by which everyone can participate in a discussion about what Chicano and Chicano studies is about. I kind of feel the same way a little bit that some of the speakers have said. I kind of feel that maybe we didn't quite leave enough of a legacy. We didn't quite leave what we should have left, which was perhaps a Chicano and Chicano studies department. What we settled for was something that was maybe similar, or something that we thought kind of looked like a department, smelled like a department, and maybe even tasted like a department, but you know what? It's not a department. It's a sham. You have joint appointments, you have no power, nothing is centralized, and there's no way to achieve that kind of credibility within the context of this Eurocentric university than to have something that they understand. And a departmental structure is something that they understand. And I believe will provide stability. And perhaps that is the avenue or the dialogue that we need to start having. What are the alternatives? Because this obviously isn't working. What we have now is not working. What are the alternatives? And we need to open up this discussion as wide as possible. One way that you do not allow people to have power is by keeping them ignorant. That is why there was so much fear when this event was put on. Because when you give knowledge to people, you give them a sense of power. You allow them to want to know, what it is about the issue, and you encourage them to do something about it. But if you keep them ignorant, if you keep kind of throwing lies out there, or you keep kind of throwing half-truths out there, then you have a lot of confusion, and you really don't know what's going on. So I would encourage any avenue, whether it be this meeting or the meeting on March 5th. I saw a flyer for it in the Ackerman Grand Ballroom. I think it was 3513. I think it was a Metro meeting. Everybody needs to have input, and everybody needs to have gatherings like these so that we really know. And like what was said earlier, everybody needs to do their homework. We need to know everything and more so. Because I guarantee you, there are people in this room who are students who haven't even received their bachelor's degree yet that know a heck of a lot more about Chicana and Chicano studies than people that are teaching in the department with PhDs right now. So on that note, I just want to say that I really think that there's a need that people start opening up the dialogue and that everybody starts discussing the issues, because nobody's going to go away. The people in this room aren't going to go away. The people that organize this event sure as hell aren't going to go away. And the university needs to realize that. And everybody, and all the lackeys they have in the center need to realize that as well. Okay? Thank you very much.
I want to ask our last speaker, Jorge Mancias, to come up. Minnie Ferguson is going to say something, and I want to remind people to please sign that anti-209 petition that's going around. Don't leave without signing it, please.
Morning of March 25th, 1993, I joined a handful of students and community activists in front of Murphy Hall. As the sun was coming out and the fog was lifting, we started setting up tents. And at 10 o'clock at a news conference, we announced in no uncertain terms that we were going in a hunger strike to resolve the festering issue of Chicano studies, the health of the ethnic and gender studies, and the rights of students at UCLA and all universities to express their views without being put into jail and threatened with disciplinary action, as 95 students had been put into after the sitting at the faculty center on March 13. Died before their eyes. The reason we took this step is because we felt that what was at stake was not only a 30-year-old struggle to establish Chicano and Chicano Studies Department at UCLA, but we felt that what was at stake is what the content of education should be. We asked how it was possible that at this university, students were inspired to think about the possibilities of outer space, but not thought about the realities of the inner cities. We asked how it was possible that a university like this would spend the resources to create departments like a Department of Slavic Languages, which we are glad is available to all students here, but could not find the resources to create a department that would organize the teaching for all students about the reality of an area which not only was once Mexico, but in a city where 40% of the population at that time was Chicano, Mexican, Latino, people of one common descent. We argued that students that leave institutions like UCLA should not only leave being proficient in the technical tools of their profession, but should understand the society where they will practice their profession. That students had a right to determine what kind of education they wanted, and the students wanted an education that was relevant, and that what we were trying to do was not only for Chicanos and Chicanas, but to give the opportunity to all students to understand a key part of the society in which they live and in which they would practice their profession. We were doing this for all students at UCLA, which when they graduate will be leaders in different spheres of society. This came in the heels, just months later, of the largest and most profound civil disturbances in this city in this century. And we argued that every day there is tension, confrontation, and violence in this city because of lack of understanding between different communities, and that education is crucial in building bridges between different communities, bridges of understanding, in training leaders that will build those bridges of understanding. And that it was important enough that we were willing to give our lives for that. Why a hunger strike? Because indeed there have been 30 years of struggle. Because indeed there have been 3 years prior to that where there were demonstrations continually, and we felt it is time that we put a time limit to it. We will only be able to live for a few days on water. That is the time, all the time you have to come together at the table and resolve this issue. Because we wanted to emphasize that it was indeed a life and death issue. Not only our life or death, but that building those bridges of understanding between communities is an issue of life and death. Lives are lost continuously, and the quality of life of many children is forever affected when they have the opportunity to get a good education and to understand who they are and where they came from and which way should they go forward. It was a life and death issue. There were many times where many doubted whether the hunger strike would be successful in achieving its end. I was twice the age, Pastel and I were twice the age than the students. We knew that Chancellor Young had never in his 25 years as Chancellor ever yielded, not even when the Regents, after he had been Chancellor for only 1 year in 1968, ordered him to fire Angela Davis. He had made it clear he would not yield, and when he was asked by reporters what he would do, he said, "They are wasting their time. I've already made my decision." We responded, what he means is that we're wasting our lives because we will not end the hunger strike until this is resolved. So Pastel and I knew we would be the first ones more likely to go, although he's a lot healthier, as you can see, than I am. So we had to confront the real prospect of death. And I can tell you, we are all going to die someday. The question is not even when or how we die, but how we live and what we live for. Because the most important message we try to send out with that hunger strike, and the reason I follow these students and community people like Pastel and Arturo into this hunger strike, is because we felt that so many of what needs to be done in our society doesn't get accomplished because for over 20 years, we bought this trickle-down empowerment approach. Where they're telling each one of you that if you become a senator, if you become the head of a corporation, if you as an individual, Chicana, Chicano, Latino, Latina, Mexicano, Mexicana, get up there, your community will benefit. And then once you get up there and become vice chancellor, then you have to choose between your job, getting a job, keeping a job, or doing a job. And too many convince themselves it's more important for me to be here, and somehow my community will benefit. And what we said was that that's not true. That's why we're not getting anywhere. That's why we're getting nowhere fast. What is necessary, and what Cesar Chavez, and what so many throughout history has taught us, is that we only make progress when we individually and collectively are willing to put aside our self-interest and put first the common interest and do anything that's necessary to give ourselves for the common good. As the days progressed, our legs got weaker and we could no longer walk. And thousands marched for us throughout this city. As our voices got weaker, thousands stood up and spoke for us. There were many moments that I vividly remember, but there's three that particularly stand out. One was when, after a couple of days after the hunger strike began, this teacher in Eastman Elementary School brought these little children from her school and started a trend, because this began to happen every day. These little children from all over the city came to the camp, wanted to talk to us, and gave us this card that they had made by hand. And these cards have little pictures, but each one of them had also a message and a commitment. There was one who said, "I will not chew gum until we win." Another one who said, "I will not drive a bicycle. I will not watch television. I will not play Nintendo." Every single one of them was willing to make a sacrifice in order to show their support. And these children will never forget. Another moment I will never forget is on the 12th or 13th day of the hunger strike, on Friday, June the 4th. The next day, Saturday, at a very critical moment in the negotiation with the administration, a march had been planned from Placita Olvera to UCLA, and you know how far that is. Well, that night, past midnight, we were sleeping on the tents, and this rain started raining. It woke us up, and I thought, we're out of here. We're going to be flooded. You've been to Chamber Plaza. It's a depressed area. We're going to have to leave this place. And then I hear all this commotion outside. And I peer from under the tent, and I see dozens of young students, completely drenched, working under the rain, extending this huge piece of plastic all over this large tent so we wouldn't get wet. The reason I put my life on the line is not only for what I believe and what we all believe in, it's because I gave faith in these students. I believed in them. We live in a world where you're told trust no one, and in which we're given reasons not to believe in anyone. And I trusted each and every one of them, and each of every one of you, and many throughout the city, with my life. I believe that people will respond as they did at night. Well, the next morning, when we woke up, it was pouring. It was a little mini El Nino on the eve of that march, on a very critical day. So we thought they're going to cancel the march. And then we heard that indeed there were only about 200 people, 300 people assembled in Placita Olvera, under the porches of the restaurants. And some people were talking about going home. And then one man, and I wish I knew who he was, I think he was Manuel Montañez, but I'm not sure, stood in the rain and said, "Those young people are willing to die for us, and we don't even want to get wet." And he started marching. And everyone followed him. And Channel 34 kept covering the march, and other media outlets started covering the march. And halfway through the march, thousands of people were marching under the rain. And then the sun came out. They marched through Beverly Hills, Shouting Chicano power. Their march through the Miracle Mile, it took them hours. It took them hours to walk from Placita Vera to UCLA. But they got here by the thousands. And I was told that there were scouts going ahead of the march to see that everything was okay. And just before they got to UCLA, here on Westwood Boulevard, there was a fancy fruit shop, Sunshine Store. It's gone already. And for some reason, one of the scouts noticed that the owner took out some fruit and put it in front of the store. And the student looked over and noticed that the owner was preparing a camera and hid to take pictures. So they went down and told everybody, when you go by that fruit store, don't touch a single fruit. This was after hours of marching. Thousands of people marched in front of that store. Not one touched a single fruit. When the hunger strike was over on June 7th, many asked us whether we had achieved our goal. And I think in a very real sense we did. Because thousands of children will not forget. As Juan Jose said, it inspired many activists throughout the city. He was one of many who are here who gave so much and not being under the limelight. They were there 24 hours every single day. They walked for us, they worked for us. And when Juan Jose and others began to organize this fight against Proposition 187, students by the thousands started walking out to protest against 187. You remember that. And I went to one of the first meetings of the students, and somehow the faces looked familiar. And a couple of them came up to me, they recognized me, and they told me, you know, we were so upset with you guys when you ended up the hunger strike, when you won, because we were ready to start these walkouts all throughout the city. But we knew each other. So when 187 came up, we were ready to go out. We were ready to continue what you guys and others before us had started. One of the things we fought for was that there should be no cuts in all the ethnic and gender studies programs. It's been almost 5 years. And that we won. The charges against only 95 students, the right were withdrawn. The right to express their views was respected. The problem is, what happened to the Cesar Chavez Center? And here, I will just put it simply this way. I think the Cesar Chavez Center was limited in all that it could have been, and it still can be, because of an illness that chews up and corrodes our souls, our hearts, and our minds. We live in a society where we're told, I come first. Get on your horse and be this lone ranger. Get on your car and the freeways and, get angry at anybody that stands on your way. Go for it. Get there, and if you are a woman, you're a Chicano, you are African American, justify your ascent up the ladder saying, I'm doing it for my community. Individualism, rampant individualism and competition is a disease that eats at the soul, the heart, and the mind of every human being that lives in this society, but is much more damaging in communities like ours, which have not only responsibility towards members of our community, but towards all members of society, in teaching them how we can live in harmony, by teaching them that it can only come about when we respect each other's heritage and respect what each one of us is. But it also, I think the center has fallen victim of another illness, and that is that when you are a woman, when you are a member of a minority, and you grow up being told you're nothing, you're less than human, you're no good, your natural defense is to say, I am somebody, to fight it. But sometimes we get carried away, and we want so much to show that we're somebody, that we want credit. We want to be in front of the camera. We want to be the person who gets the credit, instead of thinking of what it is that we want for all of us. The root word of community is unity. The root word of community is unity. And unity begins with you. And what each one of us must do is conquer this illness, conquer this disease. with clarity and commitment and the willingness to give everything that's necessary of us to fight for the common good. To be honest enough to accept our mistakes, to learn from others, and once we believe in something, to give everything, and to, in that way, give meaning to our life, because I repeat, the important thing is not, we're all going to die, the important thing is not how long we live, but how we live and what we live for. There is nothing more important that you can do while you're at UCLA than beyond learning as much as you can, than being an active participant in what kind of education you're going to receive in the decisions that are made in these universities, and what kind of university you leave for those that come after you. What is missing with the Social Science Center now is something we fought for, and we stayed on hunger strike for 2 extra days. And that was when we were told, it is not going to be called a department, because the chancellor is too proud to accept that. We said, fine, it's a center. But then if it's not a department, although we felt that it had all the features of a department, it had its own budget, etc., the ability to hire teachers and give them tenure. We said if it's not a department, then it won't be run as a department with a chairman leading it. But it will be directed, it will be led by a committee where students will have equal voice with faculty, staff, and the community. And that's part of the agreement we arrived at. But others don't have faith in you. They don't believe in you. They don't trust you. You're not smart enough. You don't know enough according to them. Well, I did it 4.5 years ago, and I'll do it again. I believe in you, I have faith in you, I trust you, and I would once again put my life on the line for you. But that requires that you assume the responsibility and that you're willing to do what is necessary and give of yourself, including putting aside our egos, to fight for the common good. There is nothing better that you can learn from your stay at this university. That what is your role in society as an individual? How do you build unity? How do you start building unity to build a strong community? And to learn what it is that really gives meaning to our life. To us, I think that was the most important lesson for me of the hunger strike. I think that was what gave that event so much power and reached people, as somebody said before, throughout Latin America. Because I got calls and letters from all over this continent and even from the other side of the ocean. So at this juncture, what I urge you to do is to learn what I learned from the students and the community people, the 8 people that led me to that tent, one of the most intense experiences of my life. And be willing to put the common good over our self-interest. Thank you.
It's very difficult to establish anything. So one of the main reasons that has occurred is because the administration has consistently, refused to hire a tenured faculty member to be the director. At this point, like was already stated, Vice Chancellor Raymond Paredes has always been very much opposed to a Chicano Studies department. And so with him, when we're calling for his, we want to work together because it's about unity. It's about us, all of us working together to establish this department. But what has happened? Since 1993, I think it's important for everybody to know that there has never been, and there still does not, there is no permanent director for the Cesar Chavez Center. If you don't have a director, you don't have stability. You cannot implement anything. And so that's a problem right now. It's also important to know that the only Chicana and Chicano Studies counselor on this campus has been fired, and the position, which is worse, not only was she fired, but the position was completely terminated, which means that there is no Chicana and Chicano Studies counseling on this campus. All right, what does that mean? That means that there's no recruitment. That means that there's no academic counseling. That means that there's no promotion of the center. That means a lot of things. Basically, that means that there is no communication, effective communication between the students between the professors, between the students and the director, and between our community and the Cesar Chavez Center. So that's two things, no director nor counselor. We don't have a Chicana and Chicano Studies head librarian. On this campus, we probably have the most extensive, the most, most informative Chicana and Chicano Studies collection. But what has the administration done under the leadership of Vice Chancellor Raymond Paredes and Dean Scott Watt? They've refused to hire a Chicana and Chicano Studies head librarian. So our collections, we have some very, very, very like original, like unique collections down there. They are just completely abandoned in the basement of Haynes Hall. When it rains, water goes down there and our collections are ruined. And you know how much money is being spent to buy books? $5,000. As students, as community members, as organizers, every single person knows that $5,000 does not buy you too many books. As students, for 3 or 4 classes, we spend $200–300 for 1 quarter. How is $5,000 going to sufficiently take care of and expand the rich heritage that lies in the basement of Haynes Hall? That's another thing that they've done. There's no student or community input. They're trying right now to divide us as students. They called, which is important for all, I think all of us to know, this whole day, this whole week, since the flyers came out that we were having this event, students have been harassed. We've been intimidated. We've been given nasty messages. Our integrity, our work has been completely, they've attempted to completely destroy the credibility, the integrity of the hunger strike and all.
Not getting something that belongs to us. We just give them a chance to take it because we're not prepared to do it. And that's the reason why they don't let us do it. That's the reason why try to stop us to get better. Chicano Studies, according to what I understand, is good for every one of us. If I understand right, when they start to this program, they only had $35,000 for a program. Now, they're supposed to have $350,000. I don't know if they have it or not. I don't know if it's being using correct or not, but the money is supposed to be there. A lot of the new students don't even know that the Chicano Studies were running with $32,000. Feel like we have to get together. We have to be in all the points and forget about some of the people think wrong, but that's okay, nothing wrong with that. We have to explain them and then make it understand that we need this. It's about time to start getting in the place that belongs to us. We, the community, the Latino, Hispanic, whatever they want to call, I said, Mexicanos or Mexicas, or whatever we want to say, is big enough to get something better. We are 3/4 of the population in Los Angeles. You know, the students in the school, in the elementary school, and the high schools, and junior highs, is almost 70%. What happened with all the students? Where they go? What universities? Now they not be accepted in good universities because they keep us in a low education. So we have to wake up. So by the time they get good students, get into the schools, teach in the high school, junior highs, and get another ideas to our future population. Thank you very much for
I'd like to invite the
chair. The administration tries to tell a lot of students that are curious that go ask faculty members or students involved. The reality is we are not involved, and we have never really been, we've been involved, but they have never acknowledged our ideas and our opinions. And I think that's what's important. And I think the reason that they don't acknowledge our opinion is that we talk about specifics. We talk about having, and at that time, Rubén was a council with 30 Chicana and Chicano Studies students. Now we have over 200 Chicana and Chicano Studies majors and specializations. I don't know why we don't have one single counselor. We should be talking about 3 counselors or more. And now we don't have anything. If they get rid of affirmative action, then why don't we have program. Our classes, you know, four classes being offered at the Cesar Chavez Center are minimal. You know, and there's really, we're not talking about expanding the type of faculty members that are being hired. Students should be involved in that. The community members should be involved in that, and we haven't. And I think that's where it's important for students to continue to like get together to try to like, you know, organize. And the ideas have come from the young people. The ideas have historically and will always continue to come from the young people, and we are the ones that are going to be teaching Chicana and Chicano studies in, you know, a couple of years. And I think that's probably one of the biggest techniques, tools that the administration has done to manipulate and really weaken Chicana and Chicano studies on this campus. And one of the proposals that they're talking about is, you know, this whole idea about the library and taking away the library. You know, they're talking about putting Chicana and Chicano studies into these ethnic studies centers. They're focusing on cross-listing courses. They're focusing on joint appointments. All of these take us back to the IDP program that we were at one point. And I think all of us, as community members, as students, as faculty, we really need to start talking about Chicana and Chicano studies departments. We need to start talking about budgets that are permanent. We need to start talking about full hiring, 100% teaching time in Chicana and Chicano studies. We need to start talking about research, monies, and grants being allocated to fund undergraduate research. We need to start talking about students being involved and working in the Cesar Chavez Center, and they haven't done any of that. They've done it because they know what they're doing. And they know that in 1993, they did not want to give a Chicana and Chicano studies department. And it was because of the efforts of our parents, it was because of the efforts of our community people, and it was the efforts because of a few faculty members and the efforts of students that they basically were forced to give us the Cesar Chavez Center. And I think now, as students, one of the biggest things that we need to do is we really need to know our history. We really need to talk to the people that were involved. We have some of the most important people that I think that I've ever met in my life present in this room. Some of the people that have the most history. We need to talk to them. You really need to know what happened, what has been happening in the last 5 years, and what proposals are they currently talking about. And I think one of the things that where you start off is you know, one of the, you know, I saw some of the stuff that was passed out. You know, UCLA's commitment to Chicana and Chicano studies, and you read it, violated the 1993 Hunger Strike Agreement, has not hired a permanent director for the Cesar Chavez Center since the Cesar Chavez Center was initiated. And that's 5 years, they've had something like 5, 7 different directors. They've terminated the only Chicana and Chicano studies counselor, and they're not thinking about hiring one again. They laid off the only Chicana and Chicano studies librarian, and there is no Chicana and Chicano studies librarian. The current librarian that they're telling you that they hired is only 20% time and does not have a background in Chicana and Chicano studies. They allocate something like $5,000 to the Chicana and Chicano studies library. You go buy your books and support yourself with $5,000. The Cesar Chavez Center, after you pay the salaries of the staff, their trips, and everything else, it comes out to maybe about $10,000 to operate, and a lot of that, like I said, gets sent to like 80 copies. They have one faculty member that's a full professor tenured, which means, you know, they can't be removed. Everybody else are assistant level faculty members. We have one that's a tenured Chicana and Chicano studies faculty member to the Cesar Chavez Center. You have the library, which is in the basement of Haynes Hall, and they're planning to turn that into a reading room. So they want to get rid of our library. They're dismantling. They never even had any real programs for undergraduate research. They're talking about proposals to put the Cesar Chavez Center into this ethnic studies center, which seems to be, or historically has been, the idea that, you know, Anglo universities have always wanted to put ethnic studies centers into this huge ethnic studies center to dilute our history and everything else. And you talk about our admissions rates, you talk about our dropout rates, where we're still dropping out at 50% or more. I mean, UCLA, come on. there's a lot of